Our gospel reading for this morning comes from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 16, verses 13 through 20. Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, but others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he sternly ordered the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Almost every week, the topic of church keys will come up at our church staff meeting. We'll be reviewing the church calendar for the week, and someone will say, "There's a group meeting at such and such time. Does anyone know how they're going to get into the building?" Or somebody will say, "This person is called and asked if they can have a church key in order to meet with so-and-so." And then a discussion ensues. It's usually the same discussion over and over again. "I thought they had a key." "What do you mean they don't have a key? Are you sure?" "Well, let's check the list of everyone who has ever been given a key." And then some will say, "Okay, but that list is kind of old, and we know that sometimes somebody will give their church key to another person just to help them out, so we're not exactly 100% sure. For instance, so-and-so said they had a key, but they got that key from this person who said they got it from that person who said they got it from their grandparents when their grandparents were on the Buildings and Grounds Committee in 1950. So we just, that key list is there, but here at the church, we have different keys for all sorts of different doors. So if you're given a key, a church key at some point, someone might tell you, "Now this is the key for the front door," or "This is the key for the back door," or "This is the key for the front door only on Wednesdays and back door on Saturday and Tuesdays, and this key is only going to work when it's a full moon and you turn around 3 times before you put it in the lock." It's a miracle. It really is a miracle that anybody can get in a locked door here around the church at all. We really do have a secret closet, a secret key closet. And there are keys in there that we have no idea what they open or what they're for. So I'm pretty sure that when Jesus said to Peter, "Here are the keys to the kingdom of heaven," and Peter said, "Well, that's nice, but I really don't want to be responsible for a church key. I tend to lose things anyway. Isn't there someone who can just come and unlock the door for me when I want to get? Maybe, why don't you just give that key to Judas? He's the treasurer. I'm sure he'd be responsible. He wouldn't lose the keys, would he?" One of my favorite movies is a movie called Millions, and it's about a little boy, Damien, who finds a suitcase full of hundreds of thousands of dollars that was hidden by a bank robber after a bank robbery. Damien is a very devout little boy, and he is trying to find ways to give the money away to the needy all throughout the movie. The whole time, though, that he's doing that, different saints from the life of the church, different saints appear to him, and give him guidance and try to answer some of his questions. One night, Damien is sitting in his bedroom stuffing envelopes from different charities full of money, just trying to give away as much of the money as he possibly can, when St. Peter walks into the room. And St. Peter has a robe with a rope cinch on, and on that rope cinch is a big ring with all different sorts of keys on it. And Damien looks up at Peter and says rather pleadingly, "This money, it's all stolen." And Peter says in exasperation, "I know." And he holds up his ring with all the keys on it. He says, "Patron saint of keys, locks, and general security, I'm on the door." And he says it, though, like it's a job that he didn't exactly ask for. Without question, in all the gospel accounts, Peter is given a place of prominence among the disciples. And that prominence is especially evident here in the passage which we read when Jesus asked the disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" Jesus asked all the disciples this question. So it must have been a question that at some level was a topic of discussion that Jesus and the disciples knew was out there. Jesus poses the question first in a rather general way. What are people saying about me? Who do they say the Son of Man is? Now, from the beginning of his ministry, Jesus made such an impression that people asked, "Who is this?" When Jesus cast out the demon from the man in the synagogue at Capernaum, people said, "Who teaches with this kind of authority?" And when Jesus told the paralyzed man who was lowered through the roof by his friends, when Jesus told that man, "Your sins are forgiven," the religious leaders said, "Wait a minute, only God can forgive sins. Who does this person think he is?" And when Jesus and the disciples were caught in a storm on the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus calmed the winds and the waves by saying, "Be still," the disciples then turned to each other and said, "Who can do such a thing? Who is this? Who is he?" All of Jesus' ministry in Galilee seems to lead up to this point, this question that is prompted again and again and again. Who is he? And now Jesus turns and addresses the question head on. But he asks it first in this kind of speculative sense. Who do people say that I am? What's the word about me out there in the crowds? What are the polls saying? And it's obvious the disciples are well aware of the answers that are trending. They respond, "Well, some say John the Baptist, and others say Elijah, and some people say Jeremiah or one of the other prophets." And then Jesus asks them directly, "But who do you say that I am?" It's certainly something they must have been wondering, something they must have been asking themselves or asking each other. And likely it seems to be at a much deeper level than the speculation of the crowds, because they had left their jobs and they had left their families and their homes because he called them to follow him. He had changed the course of their lives, and they must have been asking themselves, "Why am I doing this? Who is he that I'm willing to do this, to just follow him?" Peter is the disciple that answers Jesus' question. "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Now, Jesus doesn't say, "That's exactly the right answer, Peter. Good for you. You get an A. You get a gold star. I'm glad that you finally have figured it out. I was wondering how long before you realized what was going on here." It's not what Jesus says. Jesus tells Simon, who is still called Simon at this point, Jesus tells Simon, "Simon, God is at work in you. This isn't something that you've figured out on your own. God has revealed this to you. God is showing you that I am God's promise and power at work in the world right now, here at this very moment, in this place right in front of you. You haven't, Simon, just answered my question. You now have become a part of God's work as you know and as you believe and as you trust and as you follow me. It isn't just an answer to a question. It's what you're giving your life to. Simon's profession of Jesus as the Christ, God's living Son, according to Jesus, it's a gift of faith. It's a blessing of God. And it is on this gift of faith that Jesus says to Simon, I'm going to call you Peter, rock, and on this rock I will build my church. In the Protestant tradition, we've emphasized that Jesus speaks about the gift of Peter's faith as the foundation upon which he will build the church, not a particular office or quality or characteristic that Peter has. It's the faith that Peter has been given, which will become the rock, the foundation upon which Jesus says he will build his church. It is, though, to Peter right then at that moment, as a person who demonstrates the work of such faith, that Jesus says he will give the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And it is the work of such faith that which is being manifest in Peter's life and in his answer, faith that is received and then given to others, that opens to others God's promise and power. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Faith that is given and received opens, but when faith is absent to the openness of God's grace and God's goodness, life remains closed. It is the faith, the trust, and the belief in Jesus that is the operative dynamic that Jesus acknowledges here in Peter. Peter, here in this moment, even in contrast to the other disciples, is the example of the gift of God's faith at work in his life. Who do you say that I am? What is your response to what God is doing in and through me? How is your life now being caught up and given over to God's presence in Jesus? It's not Peter's personal power. It's not Peter's inherent ability. It's not Peter's will or determination. It is Peter open to and being given the gift of faith by God, which Jesus says he will build the church upon. Commentator Debbie Thomas says that it is Peter's living into the question, not giving a correct answer, but living into the question that begins to explore Jesus' identity, which is beginning here and the important thing to note. She writes, when I think about the whole of Peter's story, all of the biographical details that we 21st century Christians have the privilege to know and ponder, I'm stunned by the answers that Peter must have lived into as time went on. Answers that he could never have articulated right then at that moment or even in the early years of his discipleship. Who do you say that I am? And Peter would have answered, you're the one who found me fishing in a boat and you gave me a new vocation. You're the one who healed my mother-in-law. You're the one who said, yes, walk on water. You're the one who caught me before I drowned. You're the one who glowed on a mountaintop while I babbled nonsense. You're the one who washed my feet while I squirmed in shame. You're the one who told me accurately that I'd be a very coward on the night you needed to be brave. You're the one I denied 3 times to save my own skin. You're the one who looked into my eyes with pain and pity when the cock crowed 3 times. You're the one who fed me breakfast on a beach and spoke love and fresh purpose into my humiliation. You're the one who gave me courage to preach to 3,000 people on Pentecost. You're the one who taught me I must not call unclean what you have pronounced clean. You're the one who stayed by my side through insults and beatings and imprisonments. You're the one I followed into martyrdom. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Living into this question that Jesus poses. Who do you say that I am? It's as much about how our lives are shaped by our engagement with Jesus as we seek to receive the answer that God gives us in faith. It's as much about the way we give ourselves over to Jesus' work and ministry and mission as it is about the idea that we should have a place of prominence because now we've suddenly said the right thing. We say the Apostles' Creed week after week after week after week here in our worship service. Sometimes we switch things up like we did last week, and we're going to do today, and we use a different creed or confession, perhaps the Nicene Creed, or as today, a passage from the brief statement of faith. And I'm sure that's pretty discombobulating to many of you. You say, what happened to the Apostles' Creed? I had just memorized the right answer, and now they're asking me to stand up and say something different. But I had this fantasy as I was thinking about Jesus' question to Peter and Jesus' question to us. What if we didn't just all stand up every Sunday and repeat the Apostles' Creed together? What if you were given a piece of paper with a number on it, and every Sunday, just kind of at random, we called out a number, 34, and you looked at your ticket and said, 34, 34, you have to come forward, stand in front of all of us and say the Apostles' Creed to all of us gathered here so that we can listen. Hear what you're saying. And then could you then also share with us how your life has been caught up in those words? I believe in God the Father Almighty, a maker of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ his only Son. Share with us how your life has been caught up into that. How you've lived into these questions. Would you hear the creed a little bit differently? Sunday after Sunday? Would you say the creed a little bit differently? If you were the one here in the front, speaking, answering, who do you say that I am? Well, it's just one of my wild fantasies. I'm not going to try it next Sunday, unless the Spirit leads me to. Who knows? What are you doing here? What is your life caught up in? How are you living into this question, who do you say that I am? Our lives are caught up in God's work in Jesus, God's way in Jesus, God's vision and purpose for the world in Jesus. And knowing that, embracing that, living that out, that's the key to the church. That's the key that unlocks and opens us to God's goodness and God's mercy and God's love. You've been given the keys by Jesus in your faith to the kingdom of heaven. I'll never forget that my dad gave my brother John, I think it was on his 15th or maybe his 16th birthday, a set of keys as his birthday present. It was in a little leather key pouch with little metal hooks that each of the keys were hooked on. And he had gone to the hardware store, and I think it must have been when they just started to make keys in different colors. And so he gave John this leather key case with an explanation about the different keys that are in there. I'll never forget it. John, he said, here's a green key. That's the key to the house. It's to remind you of the green pastures of home. And here, there's a red key. That's the car key. And it actually was a car key to the car. It was red to remember, be careful, warning, danger when you're driving the car. And there was a blue key. And that was the key to the church. And Dad said, it's Presbyterian blue. It's a key over here to Grace Covenant, because John was always going and helping out with things at the church. Remember the church and faith. And then there was a gold key. But the gold key hadn't been cut. It was just a blank key. And Dad said, John, this is the key of life. Remember to inscribe on it integrity, love, faith. Remember to give your own answer to Jesus' question, who do you say that I am? Boy, I always wanted Dad to give me a set of keys like that. I always envied John for those keys. So if you ask me, I need to get a key for the church. We're going to have a meeting. Be warned, I'm going to give you a smart alecky answer. Jesus has already given you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Don't you hear him asking, who do you say that I am? I wonder what you will unlock when you find your answer. Amen.